Alan, my screen is there telling me the meeting is streaming live.
Is it?
Yes.
Good.
So is mine.
I've checked and it's actually streaming live on YouTube as we speak now, so.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. And you?
Fine, yeah, so far, so good.
Yeah, I can confirm it's streaming live as well.
We appear to be on now, Alan. Do you want to get it going?
Sorry, members. Yes, I can confirm that we are now live, Mr. Mayor, if you want to start the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members, officers, and any members of the public present. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies for absence from councillors Madison and Brown.
Are there any further apologies?
Yeah, there's also apologies from Councillor Ricky Jones.
Thank you. Any more? No, right. Does any member or officer wish to declare an interest?
As Strategic Director of Internal Services, I would like to declare an interest in agenda item 11, restructure of directorates and appointment to statutory officer posts. Thank you.
Any more? No. Right. I call upon the Leader of the Council to move that the minutes of the meeting of the General Assembly of the Council held on the 22nd of July 2020 be confirmed as an accurate record. Councillor Kite?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to so confirm that they are an accurate record.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Right, Mayor's announcements. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, there's nothing I have to announce, because I know Councillor Kite will do all the announcing afterwards. Right, Councillor Kite, are there any announcements you wish to make?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to make many. I'm simply going to raise one issue, which I think members are aware of, which is the we've now begun our very inaugural, or the inaugural Black History Month, and I think we're very, very proud of the work that's gone on. It's a great shame that with the pandemic we're not able to do more in the way of events, but it's a very, very welcome addition to the calendar, and I'd like to pay particular tribute to Councillor McLean, who spent a lot of time putting this together, and other members of the council across the parties who I think collaborated with him on the initial first year of this. I think it's already showing signs of going well, and I think it's exactly the right thing to be doing, and it's a very welcome addition to our calendar. So other than that, Mr. Mayor, I have no real announcements to make.
Yes, I also think Councillor McLean's done a great job on this. Members, I'm advised that Councillor Cosine has submitted 3 questions under Standing Order 14. Councillor Cosine, would you like to ask your first question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Parking, especially around schools, is becoming worse and more dangerous. The enforcement manager said it takes almost all his team to cover one school. That means little or no enforcement at other schools. Will the leader now agree 7 enforcement officers is not enough to cover all of Dartford?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to. Mr. Mayor, I don't doubt that Labour members are entirely sincere about this issue. Indeed, I know they are, as we all are. But I don't think Councillor Gosign would wish to give any impression that's not right in terms of the work that's being done by our officers. The implication that school safety enforcement officers only cover one school, leaving every other school with little or no enforcement, is not right. Officers can, of course, only be in one place at a time, but they work to a rota covering schools across the borough. The truth is that DBC's team of dedicated and efficient enforcement officers currently have a list of 30 infant, junior, secondary and grammar schools with enforceable markings that are patrolled morning and afternoon on a rota. I would not wish our hardworking officers to be in any way demoralised by a description that they were only covering one school. I will nevertheless turn to his main point that Dartford should employ more enforcement officers. Mr. Mayor, in almost every other area of community safety, Labour quite rightly support the notion that prevention is better than enforcement. There is no reason why that should not carry here too. In part, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Gosign's own question demonstrates exactly why it is simply not practical to tackle this problem with more and more parking wardens. If he accepts that it takes our entire team to cover one school, he must surely see that even if we were to double our entire team, the number of schools that they could reach would barely scratch the surface. His views may look good in terms of theory, but I'm afraid they don't actually solve the problem. And when you talk to professional officers and parking specialists, they will confirm that it's simply not possible to reach every school that we might like to. Dangerous and antisocial parking outside schools is a problem for most councils, Mr. Mayor, and by way of example, I will read from the parking report of a neighbouring authority that Councillor Gosign may be willing to accept. Labour run Gravesham employs 8 parking officers alongside 2 operational managers, yet still report the following. Gravesham Borough Council understands the importance of enforcing restrictions around schools to keep restrictions clear. We patrol each day, but due to staff resources and the amount of schools in the borough, many with parking related issues, it is not possible to have officers enforcing schools daily. Mr. Mayor, none of this is to say we cannot tackle the problem, and we are, and we try to. We are not a highways authority nor an education authority, but we have made it our business to bring together all the major stakeholders to tackle this issue. The conclusion is that our best approach is first to seek to change the attitudes of those drivers who seem willing to put children's lives at risk, and crucially, to create new regulations outside schools that can be better and more efficiently enforced by our team and by ANPR. Once the environments outside schools have better and more enforceable regulations, we may indeed see what Councillor Gosign asked for, and that is a growth in parking officers, fuelled then by an increase in PCNs and the ANPR technology, which is deterring more dangerous parking. Mr. Mayor, some important work has been done, but I absolutely concede that the more complex task of revising regulations has required a significant and perhaps even unforeseeable amount of resource that we as a small council have not been able to sustain during the last months when we have had other pressures. However, Mr. Mayor, I am pleased to confirm that 2 new post holders have now been recruited, including one with a special interest in sustainable travel, to take these important and I know very important to residents parking issues forward. Mr. Mayor, I think the message must be that we should send together is that dangerous parking outside schools is an unacceptable thing to do, and it is as antisocial as drink driving and driving without seatbelts has become. Enforcement can do so much, but it does require a fundamental shift in some drivers' attitudes to protect children when enforcement is not there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Gosign, do you have a supplementary question? I'll remind you that it is a question and not a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I do say that, I did want to just say though, in terms of what I'm saying about the quote, which I wasn't a quote actually, but it is almost a quote for quote. If you have a look back on the video tape that we did in the last meeting, the enforcement manager did say that he did say that if he uses the majority of his workers do go to one area, that means that the other areas aren't being shown, and he did say that. That's not something I'm making up. That's what the enforcement manager said. So I, can go back and have a look at that if you like. But my question is, in terms of, I think it's good that we're having 2 new post holders being introduced. I'm just wondering how you are. What measures are you taking to change attitudes And what are these new enforcement measures that you talk about? What can you give us some examples of that, please?
Councillor Kite?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I wasn't suggesting that the statement was incorrect. I was saying that the interpretation and impression it gave in this context might lead people to believe that we only ever focused on one school, and that's not right. And I know he will accept that. We have a rota whereby all schools are dealt with. And of course, it's true that if and in fact, it goes for any of our officers, they can only be in one place at one time. I think if an EHO officer is visiting one site, they can't be at another site. So it's plain that all their time is spent on one location. But I think the point I was trying to make is that we do have a rota of 30 schools that are visited. With regard to examples, I'm absolutely happy to give that. We worked on the basis that we wanted to experiment really with schools, and we chose schools in the primary sector primarily, and we have devised new parking measures around those schools. Now, many of the schools we have in Dartford are not actually, they weren't designed to cope with the huge levels of traffic and drive to school business that they have. They are in populated areas, highly structured residential areas, so I think in those circumstances, the work we're doing to actually improve the area environment around them, and crucially, as I've said, to introduce new restrictions is crucial. And those new restrictions need to be restrictions that we can pick up with the ANPR equipment. One of the issues and one of the things that we fall through with the current legislation is that, having invested in the ANPR vehicle, the rug was rather pulled from us a little bit in terms of the only things we can enforce are the structured zigzag lines outside schools. I think what we will want to see is more of those, so that our ANPR equipment can do it and can enforce. But that's an example of the kind of things we're doing. As for communications, well, communications is one of those things where you have to wait for a while to see the impact. But I think he knows. I spent some time with Councillor Allen at Wilmington to support the efforts that were being done there. I've appeared on Radio Kent following that, and appeared in a number of local newspaper articles following that. I know that we all want to be part of promoting school safety around our schools, but I don't want to put out all our eggs in the communications basket. We do need to have those structural regulatory changes around schools that can then be enforced by the teams we have. And I make him a straightforward pledge that if the workload, if the PCN issuing is there from those new regulations, then of course we will take on the officers to process them.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Cosine, would you like to ask your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've taken myself off of video only because my connection is a bit weak, and it seems a bit, and it keeps coming up unstable on my screen. So I do apologise if I'm not on screen at the moment. My question is, how is the council working with KCC in order to try and reduce the traffic problems we have here in Dartford?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the simple answer is that we work with KCC in just about every way possible, appropriate to their responsibilities and to ours. We work with KCC on the design of road schemes and regulations. We work with them on the traffic modelling and mitigation aspects of the local plan. They provide input on the traffic implications of planning applications, and a recent example of that has been the innovative work done to reduce HGV movements through the busy Dartford River crossing as part of the regeneration of Littlebrook Power Station. That was a fantastic partnership between KCC and us to deliver that. We work with them to deliver better public transport, including fast track and more sustainable transport through cycleways. We work together, of course, on numerous parking issues in our individual constituencies, and as part of our drive to deliver more parking schemes tackling the issues that arise from poor parking. We will, on that front, be reconvening the formalised bi-monthly meetings between our councils in December, as our work is now getting back into action again. We are also working with KCC on the Mobility as a Service programme, which delivers seamless journey planning and ticketing across the Dartford and Gravesham area and encourages more use of bikes, e-bikes, as well as electric car hubs. Finally, but probably not comprehensively, Mr. Mayor, we collaborate with KCC on a number of local partnerships, including several linked directly to the interests of members, including the Joint Transportation Board. In referring to traffic problems, I'm sure Councillor Cosine would accept that by far the greatest impact upon Dartford congestion emanates not from the impact of the local or regional road network, but from the strategic road network overseen by Highways England, not KCC. However, KCC have been a good and stalwart partner with us in helping to persuade Highways England of the need for new investment in Dartford, which has resulted in the changes at Dartford River Crossing, and of course, most spectacularly, of course, of all, the announcement that a new river crossing is to be built not here in Dartford, which there was a very real risk it would be, but further east in Gravesham. In closing, I hope Councillor Gosern can see that our work with KCC to tackle congestion, to improve public and sustainable transport, and to deliver more efficient and safer transport is enormously valuable to us, and it goes on pretty much every day.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Cosine, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what I'm trying to ask then basically is then, what is the council with KCC and Highways England doing to make sure that we can try and reduce the traffic that is suspended from the traffic 25? That's the main issue that Dartford residents are seeing, is that we're having a spill on from what's happening from M25. What is happening to do? What are we doing to try and reduce that? That is what I'm trying to do, really.
Councillor Kite, can you respond to that?
Well,
Even if it's the same?
Well, Mr. Mayor, we've persuaded the government to build a very large new crossing away from Dartford. The M25 carries an enormous amount of traffic. There is a sheer weight of traffic which is continuing to grow. I think we must all look to COVID and the post-COVID period as an opportunity, particularly inside traffic management, to look for more sustainable growth. But it's very clear, and we've all seen it with our own eyes, it hasn't taken very long for traffic to get back on the roads. And the simple answer is, if you're trying to solve a problem like the M25, there are two ways of dealing with it. You either ban people from having cars and using the M25, which is frankly not practical in an advanced economy like ours, or you build another crossing away from the existing one to ensure that people can get across. Now, again, we're in a cordial part of the meeting, so I'm not going to go back on old history, but I will say that our campaign to get the new crossing moved further eastward was rather undermined during the course of the 17 election by a statement that the Labour Party planned to relook at the whole thing and may reconsider Dartford again. Now, I don't think probably that was I think that was probably an uninformed Shadow Secretary of State saying that, and I know that the Labour Party in Dartford take a different view, that they should indeed see the crossing here. Although I know that there's some individual Labour members who still take the view that the crossing ought to be here at Dartford. Now, you know, that's it. The short answer, Councillor, is that if you want to improve the traffic on the M25, you have to find somewhere else for it to go. And I think the biggest investment that we can ask for is the new crossing to be built east of Gravesham and quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Cosine, would you like to ask your final question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council has done some very positive work in accommodating victims of domestic abuse. Does the leader of the council back calls for the domestic abuse bill to ensure council fund specialist refuges in the future?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Mr. Mayor, the simple answer is yes, but then of course there's a long answer which you'll expect from me afterwards. But the answer is yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. The finding of an appropriate place of safety for those escaping domestic violence is a huge priority for me and the council. It's a complex area, often requiring consideration not just of the immediate victim, but also the family and next generation with them, who have a right to pursue their own education and a good life without the shadow of abuse hanging over the family. It has to be reckoned, though, Mr. Mayor, that any new pressures on local authorities, particularly now, must be properly financed. And whilst I have no hesitation in supporting the principle outlined in the question of funding is an important one. It might be helpful for members to understand that the new domestic abuse bill currently working its way through Parliament defines local authorities as either Tier 1, an authority like KCC, or Tier 2, an authority like us, when it comes to providing funding. Our commitment can only be as good as the funding in Tier 1, and Tier 1 authorities will, of course, look to central government. In all fairness, the government have committed very significant resources to this issue, commensurate to the importance attached to it by Theresa May during her premiership when she launched this bill. The current bill, launched by a Conservative government, has subsequently been strengthened and improved by good cross-party interventions and from ideas from the third sector and the voluntary organisations who know the business best. We must, as thoughtful leaders of our community, also take care to consider the wider holistic environment surrounding domestic abuse. Funding is one thing, but funding in more specialist venues may undoubtedly be one of the steps we should take. But we have to be careful to ensure that the concentration of funding within Tier 1 local authorities does not lead to a standardisation of delivery or formulaic set of contracted providers that lose some of the excellent local variations, adaptations and experience that many individual operators and providers in the voluntary and social sector have. I will, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, just in my last 2 minutes or last minute, just talk about something a bit more controversial, which has always been on my mind when it comes to domestic violence. And that is, more controversially, I will raise a personal concern that in quite rightly and understandably embedding the value of refuges, we must not forget the role of the perpetrator. I appreciate that immense challenges are involved in rethinking a system that quite rightly prioritises the need to find a place of safety for the victim. But it is perhaps one of the only significant, significant ethical and criminal justice dilemma that when it comes to domestic violence, it is frequently the victim and their families who face the worst of the inconvenience and upheaval. In this imperfect system, Dartford Borough Council couldn't be more supportive of the needs of victims, but I do think there needs to be a debate and an argument to ensure that as we go forward, it is not the victims of domestic violence that suffer most. There has to be a system, a proper criminal justice system, which makes it very clear to perpetrators that once someone is in the care of a local authority or a refuge, any further offences committed to them are taken as the most serious possible offences, resulting in very long jail time. I'm afraid all those issues are above my pay grade, but it's one of those things that concerns me greatly. And all we can do at the moment as a Tier 2 authority is commit ourselves wholeheartedly and fully to supporting the needs of this cohort of people. They deserve our support. They will have our support. But I do think there needs to be a national debate, first of all, about violence and what is deemed in some places to be acceptable violence. And there never is an excuse for violence. And also how we then deal with a perpetrator. And personally, I'd like to see much more stringent and robust measures taken against those who threaten other people in a coercive relationship. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. I agree with you entirely. Councillor Cosine, do you have any supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about the perpetrator. The perpetrator, that's exactly what needs to be done. More needs to be harsher sentences does need to be done, but also in terms of refugees, I work with refugees as a social worker, and the support that refugees can give, as opposed to just, for instance, if we was to place them in a self-contained flat or a hotel, is that they can have added support, such as being able to get them help with moving on from the refuge, getting them in touch with local resources, giving them, making sure that they can get support with funds if they need any as well, because they may not have any fleeing from domestic abuse. So it's really good to hear, Councillor Clark, that you would actually support that and the council will support that. So in saying that, this is a cross-party bill that's happening in Parliament, and would you be able to make our views known to our MP so that he will continue to support this as well for us?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure it's necessary to do that, but I will. If there's a scintilla of doubt about it, I'm very, very happy to do that. But I believe he already does support it. I will just say this though: we've got to accept the implications of what we decide here, as we always have to. And I do have, and it's not a debate for tonight. We're in an unlikely and unfortunate circumstance of having a Zoom meeting, but what worries me a little bit about the wholesale transfer of responsibility to councils, as I've said, is that councils may then choose to exercise that responsibility through the offering of a pan-county contract, and I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go. I have seen in places like youth services, for example, very good local and individual operators squeezed out of the system because they are not offering pan-county services. So I think we need to, as an authority, one of the things we can do creatively as a Tier 2 authority is to make it very clear to our Tier 1 colleagues that actually we would expect a greater degree, not just of specialisation, but also localisation. We have to support the organisations that have been working in our communities for a long period of time, and we have to make sure we target the funding, such as it is, to those organisations that have been offering good service, not just see this as a council responsibility to be handed out via a single contract. I don't know the area specifically well enough, but it's been a residual fear for me that sometimes the local service, the local knowledge, the local provision, the local commitment, and the fantastic experience of organisations that are operating in the field needs to be taken into account, rather than just setting up a tier 1 authority with a big contract to cover its responsibilities.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. That takes us to motions. Members, it's been some time since we have had motions at GAC meetings. I think it would be helpful if I remind you of some of the rules of debate that apply. Here we go. A member may only speak on a motion once during the debate on that motion and can only speak again if the motion has been amended since they last spoke, or speak on an amendment which has been moved by another member. They may only speak once during the debate of that amendment. The only exceptions to this are that the mover of the motion or amendment has the right to reply at the end of the debate before the matter is put to the vote, or if you are raising a point of order or making a personal explanation. No motion or amendment will be debated until they have been proposed and seconded. The proposer of the motion may speak for up to 5 minutes. All other speeches may be no longer than 3 minutes. Now, I hope that's plain to most of you, because it's certainly not that plain to me. I'm advised that their 3 motions were originally submitted under Standing Order 10, but that Councillor Cosine wishes to withdraw his motion, which is the second motion listed in the agenda. Councillor Cosine, can you confirm that you wish to withdraw your motion?
At this present time, yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is that agreed? All right. Is that agreed by everybody? Yep. Right. All right. Councillor Graham, would you like to propose your motion?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as our equality and diversity document framework at Dartford Borough Council says, this council wants to achieve equality of opportunity in all activities, including as an employer. We all want to attract people from all backgrounds to apply for jobs at Dartford Borough Council. To do this, we need to ensure that nothing in the recruitment process puts up barriers that prevent the best talent from joining us. Studies have been done in almost every continent in the world and have explored the impact of subtle cues on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation and age, and even home address, which can affect interview callback rates, and found rather depressingly that minority groups tend to be systematically overlooked in hiring processes. Anonymised hiring refers to the technique of removing personal information from candidates' applications during the assessment process. Removing names, ages and addresses can help overcome some of the unconscious bias that often results in people from more diverse backgrounds being overlooked for jobs. Anonymous recruitment began in the Boston Symphony Orchestra in 1952, when, concerned about its predominantly male composition, musicians were asked to audition behind a screen to ensure they were being judged purely on their performance. This has resulted in gender balance being achieved in orchestras across the world. Ocado research suggests 35% of UK businesses are using some form of blind recruitment, including the UK Civil Service, the BBC, HSBC, Deloitte and KPMG. By introducing this initiative, we will be sending a clear message that our approach to talent is not discriminatory. In this way, we can build a more diverse, inclusive workforce that represents the society we serve and act as an exemplar of the good practice we want to see other employers adopt. I move.
Is that seconded? It's
I second it. I second it.
Right. Can we take the vote, please? Oh, sorry, I've gone over the next page. Yes. Yes, it's open for debate. Does anybody wish to debate it?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I've got 2 hands at once there. Do you,
Okay.
Councillor Cosine or yourself?
No, let Councillor Cosine go first. I'll
He
finish.
was actually first. Councillor Cosine.
No, I wasn't first, actually. Councillor Kite was first. So
Well,
go for it.
Let's get this straight, Councillor Cosine. I'm looking at the screen. I say you're first, you're first.
All right then. All right then.
Speak up.
All right, I'll speak up. Then I want to lay my full support behind this motion. I think your name, gender, race, or any other physical description of you shouldn't be used to judge you when applying for a job. Research in both France and Germany has also found that the anonymous CV can even out the balance for women, for people from ethnic minorities, and for older people, all of whom might otherwise find it harder to be selected for interview. In Germany, a year-long study in 2010 using 8 large companies, including Deutsche Post, Telekom and L'Oreal, as well as public sector organisations, resulted in more applicant success from the anonymised CVs than from more than traditional ones. More recently this year in the UK, the Daily Telegraph reported that the use of a blind or anonymous CV was becoming more popular as employers tried to eliminate bias in their selection procedures and to protect themselves from accusations of discrimination. There is an argument that employers now like to check applicants' social media within the initial stages, but it's also important to note that not everyone is on social media either. I think the question here for me is, are we as a council doing everything we can to ensure the application process is as fair as it can be? And if we are not making our applications anonymous, can we honestly say that we are trying and doing our utmost to contribute to fairness and equality? I hope something as important as this is not seen as political, and that we all recognise that you can get fairer, that you can't get fairer than if all the applicants are submitted anonymously. Thank you.
Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no easy way to say this, really. We already do it, and we've done it for years.
Right, thank you for that, Councillor Kite. Is there anybody else that would like to debate this? I see no one else. Last chance.
Yes, please, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Councillor McCain.
Yes, certainly, Councillor McCain, just in time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the portfolio holder for equalities, and bearing in mind the work that we're doing at the moment, I would have been really, really shocked if we weren't doing this already, and as it happens that we are. I'm even more shocked, really, that before putting this motion forward, no one's checked, really, because it paints a picture of a local authority who's backward, and we're certainly not backward. We're doing quite a good job. I think all I will say is members will be aware that we're doing a review into equalities. We're about to commission that work, and I'll undertake to the Labour group, who's obviously still got some concerns, that as part of that One Dartford review, we'll look at recruitment specifically to our own staff and make sure we are doing everything that we can. I'm quite confident we are, bearing in mind that we're already doing blind recruitment, but we'll certainly look at that again in the review.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm entitled to sum up. Is it at the end of the debate? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. As I say, I'm sorry if that's caused any ripples of embarrassment, but I can't put it in any other way. We do it. We've done it for a number of years, and it's been very successful. And in the motion, the list of the organisations that the Labour Party has suggested do it, including the UK Civil Service and UCAS, could have 100% added Dartford Borough Council to that name because we do it. I am very respectful of members opposite who want to bring ideas and new feeling into this council, and I know that some of them are very committed outside of this council to particular campaigns and particular positions, and I respect that, and it's great that people are out there in the wider political world making their point, carrying their banner, wearing their t-shirts, doing what they want to do. But I would just make a call, really, that please do look up occasionally. Do look up occasionally from that world and actually look at what's happening here in Dartford. We are Dartford councillors. We represent a council that we try to be proud of. And in this case, I'm afraid, I can't say any more than the fact we've got a whole motion here come before a GAC in a public meeting asking us to do something that we've done for many years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Green, would you like to reply?
Yes, but Councillor Butterfield is first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to
Last time
butt
I
in.
heard, I was chairing the meeting, Councillor Butterfield, and I believe Councillor Kite summed up at the end. Now, everybody was asked plainly if they wanted to come in. We can't have somebody summing up after Councillor Kite, can we? They're the rules. I'm sorry, it's Councillor Green. Councillor Green, you have a right to reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I have a look at the Dartford Borough Council job vacancies at the council page, it certainly is not clear that names, addresses and ages, etc. will be removed from applications, in which case anyone applying for a job will not have that confidence. So at the very least, it's not clear on our page and needs correcting.
Thank you. Right. Well, I now need to put that to the vote. I need, is Sherry Green there
Well,
somewhere?
Mr. Mayor, could I suggest, in order to not prolong this, would Councillor Green agree to withdraw the motion? Because I can tell her that in terms of subconscious bias, the subconscious bias doesn't happen at the point someone fills in an interview form or job application. If there is unconscious bias, it happens at the sifting point, and it is quite properly at the sifting point that we make that decision, and that there is no that all items are anonymised. I think, frankly, we would always want to ask people their name and information about them, because it's required further down, and I think even she would accept, and certainly UCAS, UK government, and perhaps even the Boston Symphony Orchestra accept that further down the line there does have to be a revelation about information. But as she says in her motion, this is all about preventing it at an early stage. So we would have to gather that information anyway, and the advice that we are anonymising it isn't actually required by an applicant, it's required by us. That's what makes it fair. It doesn't make it at all fairer, or a jot fairer, if the applicant knows that. So I think we can go through with the vote, and if members of the Labour Party do want to vote yes to something we already do, that's fine. But I think it might be sensible for us to withdraw this and move on.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Kite. I'm now going to speak to Councillor Green. Do you wish to come back on that, since Councillor Kite's come back?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. As I said, looking at the applications within on the Dartford Borough Council website, it is not clear to applicants that they will be anonymised at any point. And this, as we know, will put people who are from minority or disadvantaged groups, will prevent them having confidence that if they apply, they will be anonymised. Therefore, I'm happy to amend the motion to say that from now on, our recruitment page will make it clear at what point we would be anonymising and anonymising too.
Right. What amendment would you wish to make?
Okay, I'm thinking off the top of my head. I will, from now on, Dartford Borough Council will be clear about anonymised recruitment processes in all applications and application adverts.
And you don't wish to withdraw that? You wish me to put that to the vote for you?
Yeah, I think it's really important that for anyone who's applying
Thank you, Councillor Graham. We'll put it to the vote. I don't think there's any point in kicking this about any longer.
On a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I don't think it is an appropriate amendment. It doesn't amend the motion; it completely negates the motion.
My advice here has been, I'm taking advice that it can be.
From the legal officer?
Well, from somebody just needs to second it, I'm told.
But it can't negate a motion. If our motion was to introduce something, you can't have a motion that simply says we now want to promote that. I mean, it's a complete negation of the motion.
Excuse me, Councillor Kite. I'm just going to go on to mute while I take some more legal advice.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask, is Marie Kelly-Stone with us tonight?
I am, Mr. Mayor.
Right, could you advise us on this, because we're in two minds. Well, we're not. But the advice I'm getting isn't
I'll go through the
100%.
relevant standing order. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go through the relevant standing order with you. What the standing order says that an amendment obviously needs to be moved and seconded, but it cannot be if it's outside the scope of the meeting or beyond the council's power. So that I don't think is an issue. It bears no relation to the original motion or subject matter. That's one issue that you need to consider. Does the amendment bear any relation to the original motion or subject matter? The next point we need to consider, is it incompatible with the decision previously taken? That doesn't apply. And is it intended only to impede the transaction of the business? So I think the issue that we need to consider is whether the amended motion does it bear a relation to the original motion or subject matter? That's the issue.
Well, can I ask you, does it? You've heard what I've heard. I would have thought it was very similar, but does it? Or is it a decision for me? If it's a decision for me, I'll make a decision on it. Is it my decision?
I think it does. Well, it's your decision. It's your decision to an extent, but we've got to comply with standing orders.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
From a legal point of view, I think it does bear a relation to the original motion.
You think it does, or does not? It does.
It does.
So Councillor Green can amend it to what her last statement was.
Yes, but the amendment has to be moved.
Yes. Has to be seconded, righto.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. So with that in mind, Councillor Green, you still wish to continue with this, yes? Is your latest motion seconded? Does anybody wish to second Councillor Green?
I'll second it because it doesn't say it on the page. I've just checked it. It doesn't say anything about that at all.
No, yeah, I'm only asking you if you're seconding it. You don't need any explanation. You've seconded it.
I've seconded it.
Right, and we're going to put that to the vote then. So can I ask?
No, well, we have an opportunity to debate that amendment.
We can debate it now, can we? Yeah, I'm told we can debate it. You're quite right, Councillor Kite. So, Councillor Kite.
Okay, well, Mr. Mayor, I think what would have been the dignified way here actually would have been for Labour members to say, look, we didn't mention this issue in the first iteration of the motion. We're very pleased to hear that the council already does it. I think everyone can see what's going on here, really, which is that the Labour Party don't want to give ground on anything at all. And even though they brought a motion here tonight asking us to do something we've been doing for years, there is now an amendment which suggests that, well, we were right all along and we ought to advertise it more. The point I will make to you is that HR practice is an important and detailed area of activity, and quite frankly, members, I don't think, are in a position to make a decision on this evening without a proper report on the implications of it. We've had a whole series of HR practices brought to the council. We work through them. We make sure that they're right. We consider the advice of HR professionals. There isn't a single HR professional here present this evening to actually offer any advice. The report doesn't go into it. The motion doesn't mention the issue of publicity as being part of it. We could make assumptions and hunches about it, but to ask the council to commit to do something without any professional advice about whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, I don't know. It sounds to me like it could be the right thing to do, but I don't know. And I frankly would need to have professional advice to make sure we don't do something which destabilises our recruitment process.
Councillor Butterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did ask to speak earlier, and I apologise if you didn't see me. When this came to the table and it was presented, I have to say I was very confused because I thought that we as a council always carried out the equal opportunities policies, and I do know that they are being reviewed as we speak. And I was really surprised by this, and I am confused, and I feel that I would do, as the leader of our small group, I feel that we aren't really in a position where we can take an informed judgment and a vote on this. And so I just really felt that it was worth mentioning that, and that that I really, and I know that we have fellow councillors here that may feel the same. I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I really do feel that we should take this back and look at it more in depth and take further advice. And that's really where I'm coming from on this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Now,
Mr. Mayor, can I go, please?
Councillor McLean, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Please
I can
do.
hear you now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to agree with the leader and Councillor Butterfield on this, particularly with my own portfolio interest in inequalities. I don't want any decision we make here to be a knee jerk because people are not willing to admit they've got something wrong. And I think we need to think about this again. Perhaps it can be brought back to the next GAC. If it's not something we're already doing, it can come back to the next GAC. But, you know, we need to ensure, you know, we do a lot around equalities, and we're really trying to cement it into everything that we do. And I really don't want us to agree something at GAC that is just a knee-jerk reaction because the opposition kind of got it wrong in the first place. So I won't be voting for this motion, and I'd encourage my colleagues to do the same.
Mr. Mayor, may I come?
Yes, Councillor Armitt. Councillor Armitt, can't hear you. Can you turn your microphone on?
Yes, it. I don't think we've actually got a motion on which we could vote. All we've got is Councillor Grian adding some words off the top of her head. I think before we should, if we are going to take a vote tonight, I think it does need the motion to be correctly put to us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Armitt. Right.
Mr. Mayor, on a point of order, if it does help, I'm very willing to take the suggestion made by Councillor McLean to bring this back to a future GAC. That would absolutely give the opportunity for our HR professionals to give us advice about that singular issue of publicity and the approach to our applicants. It may be right, it may be wrong. And I hope Councillor Grian understands I'm not suggesting it's wrong or right. All I'm saying is it's an important area of law and we need to make sure we've got proper advice. So if that helps to allay this, we could actually do without this motion and with this vote if I were to give you an assurance that it will come back either to a cabinet through the Cabinet Advisory Panel for scrutiny or through a GAC, whichever most appropriate.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kite. I've been advised that if Councillor Green is willing to withdraw it, that's fine. But if she's not, we have to have the vote. So, Councillor Green, if you can hear me, are you willing to withdraw this motion and take up Councillor Kite's offer, which is sensible?
We've been raising around, you know, not picking at us. We've been waiting to speak.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. You haven't been on my screen and I've just, well, please go ahead and speak. I was unaware of that. It's not deliberate. Please.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify, do we already have the policy in place? Because you said initially that we have it in place, but now I'm baffled because you're saying if we don't already have it, I feel like we're doubling down. Do we have it or we don't? And if we do, can you point us to where it is? Because that would be more sensible.
Mr. Mayor, forgive me. I know this is your authority, sir, and if you don't mind, this might help resolve it. Yes, we already do it. I agree. You say it might be sensible for us to demonstrate how we do it. What I can do is say to you, Councillor Oguntope, is it is common practice here in the council, has been for many years. And what might have been sensible, if I'm honest, would be for people put in the motion to check first. That would have been sensible. But we are where we are. And in terms of there should be no confusion. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we need to revisit this to see whether we do or do not do this policy. I'm making the point that I'm very happy to revisit the issue as to whether we should advertise it on our recruitment page as being a practice followed by the council. And that's the very singular, that's why I said it was a singular issue, not the bigger issue. There should be no confusion. We do this and we've done it for years. And we should be on the list of names in that motion, or we could have been on the list of names in that motion. But I'm suggesting that the way out of this is for us to satisfy the Labour group on this singular point by actually going away, getting the advice and bringing it back.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Oguntope, unfortunately, you weren't on the screen. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Right. Councillor Green, Are you prepared to withdraw this motion so we can move forward and join with Councillor Kite and suggestion
Mayor,
that we look forward?
with respect, I have also been raising hand for some, for.
I'm sorry, obviously I'm not getting all the people on my screen then. Please ask.
Mayor, the current equalities policy notwithstanding, there obviously has been some kind of blind spot because we have just ascertained something that it has been perhaps like an inner knowledge within the council policies of being perhaps blind to the people's differences, which means the policy in such case was totally ineffective because if the applicants were not aware of it, of anonymized policy, then perhaps they were actually put off applying, because it may be worth looking into why there is such a gender gap between male and female employees, and why there is, the representation of BAME people is not really representative adequately of the local population. And part of it may be because the police policy that Councillor Kite is applying to not having been made overtly obvious to applicants, it's been a barrier to applicants. Therefore, I'm in support of the amendment to make it obvious to applicants, because it's irrelevant if we know, if we have to ask, when majority of people who apply, if it's not made immediately obvious at the first stop, they might be put off by it. So I think that that amendment is absolutely essential, and I don't understand the objection to making it obvious to people.
Thank you, Councillor Gaskin. Before I go back to Councillor Kite, who I think has a right to reply to all of this, the fact is, there are any other members that are trying to, because this screen, we're having technical problems here. Do I see somebody else holding their hand up? Right, well, I'm going to have to, I apologise to any members that I've missed, but we're just not getting it on the screen. Right, off you go. Councillor Cosine.
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to say, because the amendment, as I understand it, is that we're looking to actually put something onto the recruitment page to say that they're actually going to be their anonymous application. So I'm not too sure why we have to go through legal to put that on. If we're doing it already, then why can't we put that onto the website to say that that's what we're doing? So in that sense, I support the amendment as well.
Right, well, I think unless there's anybody else wants to speak, if Councillor Kite would like to speak, I'll give him a
No, Mr. Mayor.
We'll go to the vote then.
No, Mr. Mayor, you have Rosanna and you have Andy Lloyd.
Do I? It's on the screen.
Might I suggest that members go into chat and simply put a Q when they wish to speak, and then Alan can monitor that and give advice to the mayor.
You see, he's just not seeing you. I'm sorry about that. Councillor Lloyd. Sorry, Councillor Green, I've got to take Councillor Lloyd first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it might help you. There's 2 pages. That's probably why you're missing some of us. You need to use your toggle to go to the other page.
I'm not actually looking for you. It's somebody else.
Okay.
Technical expert.
but if I may, look, having been involved, I'm probably one of the rarest people here that I've actually been involved in the recruitment onto the council. In that on the Deeds, Trust and Obligations Committee, we actually have independent members and we go through a recruitment process for it. And I can confirm that until you get to the very final stages of that recruitment process, you don't know a name, sex, race or religion, sexual orientation or any of the things that you must not be biased on. So if that helps people, I can confirm from practical experience, having done it a few times now, that that's what we do. And indeed, I'm very proud that the council don't discriminate on that basis and therefore have quite a nice diverse employee base. Very nice to see that our 2 principal directors at the moment are both female, which would impress some people. Me, it's just having the right people for the right job. I do know that recruitment, and I recruit myself, recruitment advertising is subject to a legal consideration. And I don't feel, well, for a start, I don't even think that Councillor Green could repeat the amendment, but I certainly don't know what the amendment is. So I'd like it written down, but I also think that we ought to be referring to the recruitment law here to ensure that anything we do put on adverts correctly reflects what we currently do. I'm not against the idea. It's just that I don't feel I know what the amendment is. I feel as though it's a bit hodgepodge, and I know that it's a legal minefield. We must do the right thing, as we do in practice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Currans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was only about to say that I think both Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Kite explained exactly why we couldn't just vote on the amendment that was put forward. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Currans. Councillor Green, you have a right to reply.
Thank you. I still go back to my previous point that it's very important for anyone applying for a role to know they will be treated fairly. And we continue to have some problems. Admittedly, the figures were never released this year, but last year we had a 27% gender pay gap at the council. So I feel as a woman that potentially could put me off applying for the council, and I'm sure other members from minority groups potentially have the same concerns. I take Councillor Lloyd's point in fairness that I did say my amendment very quickly, and I'm more than happy to repeat it. My suggestion is that we amend the motion to say that from here on in, we will be very clear about our recruitment policy in all adverts, and from here on in, we'll be clear about at what point anonymised recruitment will be used. Is that clearer for you, Councillor Lloyd? Oh, sorry, I'm just waiting for you to nod. I would still like to put that amendment forward.
Is that in addition to the existing words?
No, that's the amendment.
Right. Can I ask, have we got our strategic director there to take the vote? You still wish to put this right to the vote? Have we got a strategic director there to take the vote?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you have.
Right, could I ask you to do that, please?
Okay, so when I call your name, members, can you please say clearly for, against, or abstain? Councillor Anne Allen.
Want to against the amendment, against.
Councillor Armitt.
Against.
Councillor Barham.
Against.
Councillor Ben Musa.
For.
Councillor Burrell. Councillor Burrell.
Did he send his apologies? No, he's muted. He's muted. Councillor Burrell, can you turn your microphone on? Councillor Burrell, can you turn your microphone on?
I'll come back to him. Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Butterfield.
Against.
Councillor Canham.
Against.
Councillor Cutler.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Eadie.
Councillor Eadie, have you got your microphone on?
For. Councillor Garden.
Against.
Councillor Gaskin.
For.
Councillor Sasha Goeslein.
For.
Councillor Romana Goeslein.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Hummock.
Against.
Councillor Harman.
Against.
Councillor Honeysett. Councillor Honey.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Kite.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against the amendment.
Councillor McLean.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Moat.
Against.
Councillor Nicklin.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Oakley Dow.
For the amendment.
Councillor Oguntope.
For.
Councillor Oliver,
Against.
Councillor Ozog, Councillor Ozog,
Councillor, can you turn your microphone on, please?
I'll come back. Councillor Peters,
Against.
Councillor D Reynolds, Councillor D Reynolds,
Against.
Councillor L Reynolds,
Against.
Councillor Sandhu,
Against the motion.
Councillor Shipham, Councillor Shipham,
I think he might have gone.
He's left the meeting.
Councillor Mrs Story,
Against the amendment.
Councillor Mrs Thurlow,
Against.
Councillor Wells,
Against.
Deputy Mayor Councillor Currans,
Against the amendment.
Mr Mayor.
Against.
The amendment is lost.
Thank you. Members, we now come to the final motion submitted on the stand. We still have to vote on the original motion.
The amendment's been lost, but the motion's still.
Right, I'm told we now have to vote on the original motion. So can I ask you to take a vote on that, please?
I think I have a right to sum up at the end of that before we move to the vote.
Is that right? Well, I'm told you don't.
Okay, that's all right. I'm happy with that.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, the only point I wanted to make was that we will nevertheless, despite of the Labour's embarrassment this evening, we will nevertheless press ahead with reviewing all our equalities policies in the line with Councillor Calvin McLean's statement, and we'll make sure we always do the right thing by our applicants.
Right, thank you. Right, can I ask the Strategic Director to take the vote on the first motion, please?
Okay, this is on the original motion.
Yes, on the original motion.
Councillor Anne Allen,
I think I heard an against there, but I couldn't. Did you hear an
Yes.
against?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to get in. I'm going to vote against in because we're already doing it. And I don't want to vote against something that we already do. On that point of clarification, thank you.
Councillor Ahmet,
Against.
Councillor Barham,
Against.
Councillor Ben Musa,
For.
Councillor Burrell,
Could I just, this is Paul Cutler. John Burrells rang me and said that he can't get in, but he's against. But I don't know whether I can commit.
No, I don't think we can allow that.
Okay, I'll just let you know he's made contact, say sorry, but he's
That's
struggling to get in.
fine, but no, we can't take that.
That's fair enough.
Councillor Butler,
Against.
Councillor Butterfield,
Against.
Councillor Canham,
Against.
Councillor Cutler,
Against.
Councillor Davis,
Against.
Councillor Eadie,
Abstain from the motion.
Councillor Garden,
Against.
Councillor Gaskin,
For.
Councillor Sasha Gozine,
For.
Councillor Romana Gozine,
For.
Councillor Graham,
For.
Councillor Hummock,
Against.
Councillor Harman, Councillor Harman, Councillor Honeysett,
Against.
Councillor Kite,
Against.
Councillor Lloyd,
Against.
Councillor McLean,
Against, we already do it.
Councillor Moat,
Against.
Councillor Nicklin,
Against.
Councillor Oakley Dow,
Abstain.
Councillor Oguntope,
For.
Councillor Oliver,
Against.
Councillor Mrs Ozog,
Against.
Councillor Peters,
Against.
Councillor D Reynolds,
Against.
Councillor L Reynolds,
Against.
Councillor Sandhu,
Against.
Councillor Mrs Story,
Against.
Councillor Swinard,
Against.
Councillor Mrs Thurlow,
Against.
Councillor Wells,
Against.
Councillor Mrs Currans, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Currans, Mr Mayor.
Against.
Against. Oh, I sounded squeaky then, didn't I? Against.
Thank you. The motion
Mr.
is-
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Harman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I had IT problems. I don't know if my vote was heard, but I voted against.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Motion is lost, Chairman. Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Right. We now move on to the final motion submitted under Standing Orders 10 by Councillor Oakley Dow. Would you like to propose your motion, Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members and members of the public and officers. The pandemic emergency and even the recent economic recession can make it harder to think beyond the present or the immediate future as we cope as best we can for ourselves and our neighbours in these unpredictable circumstances. However, it is now a recognised fact that increasingly severe weather and weather events now occur throughout the seasons across this country. 2020 in the UK has seen the hottest week since records began, whilst as recently as August, Storm Francis provided winds of 78 miles an hour in the south of England. The year has also been characterised by continued widespread flooding across the country, caused by frequent, unprecedented rainfall events. From March through to August, culminating in loss of life in the recent train derailment tragedy. Harm to humans is not caused uniquely by low temperature in winter. In the context of the recent cross-party project to urgently address the global climate emergency in practical and effective strategies for the people of Dartford, is it not time to reappraise the criteria by which the severe weather emergency protocol is engaged? In the same way that this council responded so well to the pandemic emergency, can we not extend this thinking to a more appropriate response to the welfare of rough sleepers as victims of the climate emergency as well? Will the council once again set an excellent example of compassion and care for all? The motion, therefore, is that this council resolves to revisit the criteria by which the severe weather emergency protocol is applied in the Borough of Dartford to better reflect the variety of severe weather which we all now experience, and also to be proactive as a borough authority to implement a protocol in advance of such extreme events, be they high wind, high rainfall, or high or low temperature, rather than continue with the existing outdated assessment to include only cold temperatures retrospectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded?
I will second it, Mayor.
Thank you. It is now open for debate. Any member wish to debate this? Anybody at all? Councillor Lucas Reynolds. Where are you?
I'm here. Hello. There was a one of the meetings recently where we had the head of housing in discussing this particular topic. And my memory of that was that actually the severe weather emergency protocol is enacted from higher up than us, and we are instructed of that fact. And I'm pretty sure that the response that we had at the time from the head of housing was that we are not the sort of council that only waits for that to be brought to our attention, that it's been dropped on us from above, that it's now severe weather. We actually are able to look outside and determine that for ourselves. And there have been instances where the SWEP hasn't been enacted, yet we've taken measures. So I understand the sort of the sentiment behind the motion, but it sounds as similar to the previous one in that, from my understanding, we're already doing this, and that we can't actually do anything about SWEP itself because of the way that that comes into force, and it's not within our control. But we can and do our own measures.
Thank you. Any other member? No other member wishes to debate this?
Mr. Mayor, you've got Councillor McLean and you have Councillor Moat at least.
I'm sorry you're having to tell me. It's just not coming up on these screens. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, firstly, in relation to the motion, Councillor Oakley-Dow knows is someone I've got a lot of respect for, and I think actually this comes from a really good place. But as Councillor Reynolds has said, SWEP is not something we have any control over, but there is a really good regular example of when we do this, and that's in the winter anyway, around the winter shelters and all that work that we do. And I think you're right. I think Councillor Reynolds is right. We have a very good housing team that think outside the box. We don't just do the statutory minimum around people who could be affected by extreme weather. My view on the motion itself, because of all that, I'm not really sure it's something, it would be token only. And I think it would be wrong for this council just to have token motions when it's something A, we're already doing, or B, we don't really have any control over. So I'm happy to take other views from other members. But probably a little bit more research into what we're actually doing would have better informed a better written motion.
Councillor Moat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree entirely with both Councillor Reynolds and Councillor McLean. I'm really pleased you came in, because I thought I was suffering from deja vu. I'm sure we've discussed this, and we've had some extremely positive responses from our housing team. It's a truly commendable motion to put forward, if it wasn't for the fact that we're already doing it. And it really starting to worry me now, because we're having motions put to us that we will have to vote against because they're already, but then it looks bad because we're voting against a very commendable motion, but we can't vote for it because we're doing it. And I had the same issue with the last motion. These are very, very good ideas if they weren't for the fact that we're already doing them. And I'm really sorry, but I was getting a bit worried because I thought I was going a bit mad, because I've heard all this and we've answered this question already. So it's great that these things are being aired, but they don't need to be, because we're doing them. So again, we're going to look really bad Tories because we're voting against these things. We're not bad Tories. We're voting against things that are not really appropriate to be discussed at this meeting. Sorry, it's a personal point of view, but I'm getting a bit tired of this. And I know what's going to happen is that we're all going to be told, oh, look what those nasty people did. They voted against it. We've got no option at all. And I'm getting a bit tired of it, personally. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Moat. I'm sure we've all listened to what you've got to say very carefully, but everybody does have an opinion, and we mustn't sort of talk them down for having an opinion. Right, is anybody else? Councillor Kite.
Thank you. Well, I don't think this is something we absolutely already do. So I do commend Councillor Oakley-Dow for at least asking us to do something that we don't already do. But the truth of the matter is we do something better. And that's the point I think we're making. I, too, am beginning to worry that these motions that come from the Labour group are actually just intended to be almost logic traps, really, that require us to vote. Well, you nod your head, but I mean, what are we meant to do with the last one if tomorrow morning on Twitter we're told that we voted against the idea of blind recruitment advertising? It's absolute nonsense, and I suspect the same will apply to this if we don't vote for this. Now, the simple fact is that it was actually at scrutiny meeting, I think it cropped up, and I think the head of housing, who is generally regarded, I think, right across this council as being someone who's running probably the best housing service, certainly in this part of England, maybe wider spread, and he does so with the full backup and support of this council. With regard to SWEP, colleagues are absolutely right. This is actually a national protocol which we are required to enact in those circumstances. Well, I understand it's already on. I'm being told it's already on Twitter. Last thing, so that's great. We're already starting, and I think we'll have to have some cross-party conversations about this if working is going to continue. But let me carry on. With regard to this issue, we've made it clear that the SWEP is already a national initiative that local councils and local authorities are required to enact. We have heard from the head of housing at scrutiny, and I appreciate not everyone was there, so it's reasonable to have that debate again here if members really want to do that. But we've heard from members from the head of housing that actually SWEP is almost below the standard of what we do. In fact, it is below the standard of what we do because it only enacts in certain circumstances. Just to reassure Labour members, can I say the Mayor of London has reasserted in the last 2 weeks what SWEP is about. He's made it very clear that SWEP is a cold weather protocol. And he's actually produced protocols for his service, making absolutely clear that SWEP should be enacted when we're told to enact it, and when the GLA are told to enact it, and should be deactivated when the GLA are told to deactivate it. Now, that's what SWEP is. Now, we can have a debate with government or with the ministry to say, look, actually, why don't we think about other aspects of severe weather and add that in as well and think about protocols for that? But I must say to Councillor Akeley-Dow, and again, I think this does come from a good place, and I'm very grateful for the words he said about the council's activities during the last 6 months and the way he's been very fair about that. And I think that's why he's winning admiration across the council for his fairness. But I do think we have an opportunity to lobby government perhaps about it, but we don't really have an opportunity to change the SWEP because it's not within our gift to do so. If we were to review SWEP, the only thing we could really decide as a council is either to accept the invocations from government to activate it, or to deny the activations from the indications from government to activate it. And neither of those are right. We have a housing service that goes beyond the extra mile. In addressing Councillor Oakley-Dow's points about other weather incidents, and I think he mentioned Storm Francis, and he mentioned a rail crash in Scotland that resulted from temperature and environmental changes on the track side. Storm Francis, let me remind you, only ever reached amber warning. It didn't reach red warning. It was an amber warning storm. And in those circumstances, therefore, highly unlikely that a protocol related to very severe weather would have applied to Storm Francis. What it does do, however, is actually, it might make it harder for us to spend money.
Councillor Kite, can I ask you, you're over your time. Can you
I'll wind
vote
up.
for more time or wind up, please?
I'll wind up. It might actually hinder our opportunities to help. The housing officer said to me this afternoon, I wish, and I think he's spoken to some members opposite, our staff go out there with bottles of water. They go out there with clothes and help people in rain and shine and cold. That's what they do every day because that's what we ask them to do. And I think this SWEP thing, I'm beginning to think, is now just another logic trap for us. And it's a very unfortunate direction we're going in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Oakley-Down, you now have a right to reply. Do you wish to reply?
Yes, I do.
Right, well, I'll afford you the same thing. Councillor Kite had a minute and a half over. If you need a minute and a half over, I will afford you the same.
I would hope I could be more concise, but that's an ambition. Thank you for my members opposite comments about the fairness and the compassion, the place of compassion, and the sincerity that's in this. I don't seek to find logic traps, because I believe collaborative local government is the only way, the true way, to get things done to the satisfaction of the population and the residents that we're all elected by and here to represent. And yeah, I'm not expressing a virtue signaling principle here. I'm expressing something that my residents that I represent have actually expressed as a concern to me. We applaud the council and its officers' response to the need for all sections of the community, especially during the recent pandemic and the need to self-isolate, and to support the people of Dartford more widely. In so many ways, I mean, the signs are there, however, to suggest that similar challenges exist in the very near future. But surely the needs of the vulnerable, in this instance, the homeless and the rough sleepers, are more complex by virtue of two emergencies at once. And it's a sincere request that the administration recognizes the complexities which come of those two emergencies. I'm not asking for different definitions of the word emergency in different acronyms, and that's not a logic trap I can be accused of. I mean, in particular, the compassionate, swift response and effective action of the council to protect and support the homeless and the rough sleepers of the borough during the recent national lockdown. It's a perfect example. It was exemplary. What I'm asking is, can we continue that when it isn't merely imposed by emergency protocols visited upon us from government? I know, and we all can see, that the council and its officers are exemplary in their response to that. Can we actually make a commitment to produce a similar response formally, so that the vulnerable again feel that they can ask, not after 3 days of temperatures lower than a certain level, but ultimately when we have a climate emergency, a weather emergency, and unprecedented climate events, which must make rough sleeping and homelessness a terrible, terrible situation to be in. That's all that I ask. Thank you.
Right, do we have the strategic director with us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Right, can I ask you to take the vote, please?
Councillor Mrs. Anne Allen.
Against.
Councillor Arnott.
Against.
Councillor Barham.
Against.
Councillor Ben Musa.
For.
Councillor Burrell, is he with us now? Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Butterfield.
Against.
Councillor Canham.
Against.
Councillor Cutler.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Eadie.
For.
Councillor Garden.
Against.
Councillor Gaskin.
For.
Councillor Sasha Gofine.
For.
Councillor Romana Gofine.
For.
Councillor Graham.
For.
Councillor Hummock.
Against.
Councillor Harman.
Against.
Councillor Honeysett.
Against.
Councillor Kite.
Against.
Councillor Lloyd.
Against.
Councillor McLean.
Against.
Councillor Moat.
Against.
Councillor Nicklin.
Against.
Councillor Oakley Dow.
For the amendment, for the motion.
Councillor Oguntope.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Ozog.
Against.
Councillor Peters.
Against.
Councillor D. Reynolds.
Against.
Councillor L. Reynolds,
Against.
Councillor Sandhu,
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Story, Councillor Mrs. Story, Councillor Spinners,
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Thurlow,
Against.
Councillor Wells,
Against.
Deputy Mayor Councillor Curran,
Against.
Mr. Mayor.
Against.
The motion is not carried.
Thank you. Urgent items. There are no urgent items for consideration. I move that the council go into committee and that the rules of procedure for committees do apply. Is that seconded? Councillor Kite, do you wish to second that?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Is that agreed, members? Just give us a wave. We won't go into... Away you go. Councillor Kite.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll try and go, and these are important items in front of us tonight, so we'll try and go through them at a fair pace. I know some of you want to go home and hit Twitter. Item 9, there are no references from other committees. Item 10, we come on then to the coronavirus governance review and reinstatement of full allocation of seats on and appointments to membership of committees. And you have the report in front of you. I don't think it needs much explanation, this one, really. It's fairly straightforward. Does anybody wish to speak to it? Put your hand up. I am looking at the full screen so I can see everybody. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. This appears to be a very simple step towards normality, and it's one of those things getting us back towards at least having the full democratic oversight. Sorry, I didn't take a seconder. Chris Shipham has left the meeting. Councillor Lloyd, would you mind doing me the favour of seconding in place of him?
Second, please.
Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anybody then want to raise this as an item of debate before I close down? Members happy? Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Item 11 then, again, a hugely important discussion for us. It's been several months now since we lost Graham, a loss which we're still incredibly finding difficult to come to terms with. However, we have to think about the future of the council and move ahead. We've been doing a piece of work behind the scenes to do a little bit of a gap analysis, really, to think about it. Whilst I'm talking, I understand that two members of our crew are leaving the room and heading towards a room. I will just check with Mr. Twyman before we move to anything substantial in way of discussion that the Strategic Director Internal Services and the Head of Legal Services are placed in a virtual waiting room. How exciting does that sound? I will check with a minute, but we are moving towards a different structure and a different way of approaching things. I would just say at this point that subsequent to our production of the report, we've had further discussions, and I think it's been introduced as well cross-party to the council, so the group leaders, and also to our group. And as a result of that, we'd like to, Mr. Twyman, are we now free to talk openly with these matters?
Yes, Chairman, I can confirm that both of the officers are in the waiting room.
Okay, so we have had a slight thought about the way forward, and a point has been raised that although we want to have and believe it's the right way forward to have a flatter structure, the Conservative group took the view that actually in terms of representing the council outside of this place and in terms of to some extent inside, it might be helpful for the post holder to also carry the sobriquet of chief officer. So the proposal, which I think you'll find in your papers, that the post of corporate services director should also be coupled with the name chief officer, to reflect effectively the fact that the chief officer is responsible for the head of the paid service and responsible for those key elements of the council which relate to leadership of the council's functions. So we're going to make that change, and I can phrase that in the form of an amendment, if you like, or we can just accept it as a way forward. I'm sure that there will be members who want to enter this debate. So if I can take a seconder, first of all.
I second it, please.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'm very happy to open debate. Is there any member who wishes to speak on this subject of the redesign of the council structure? Yes, Councillor Hammock. I've got Councillor McLean. Councillor Hammock first.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to say I fully endorse the recommendations, but I would like to place on record on my behalf, and I'm sure I speak for all councillors, for the way our two directors have handled our council over these last few months, which has been stressful with the loss of our senior officer, but also the unusual times which we've gone through. So that is really all I wanted to say was to thank them on behalf of everybody for the work they've done.
Thank you. I was specifically asked by officers not to heap praise on them this evening, but I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's been an extraordinarily difficult period for us as a council, and I don't think there's anybody, any two people we would have rather had heading us up and steering us through that than the two directors we've had helping us, and indeed all the staff of the council. I think have responded magnificently. But staff do take their cue from those at the top, and I think those at the top have served us enormously well. Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to echo the same as David Hammock has said, and I think this new structure puts us in good stead really for the challenges ahead. I think it was important to recognise that we needed perhaps a more of a flat structure, but not too flat, if that makes sense, recognising that we've got a very important role around housing and ensuring that there's a focus on housing in one of the directorates. Even though we are doing that now, actually having a director of housing and public protection reflects that as well. And I just wanted to also congratulate Sherry on her retirement, and I'll be very sad. I know we'll have a time to do that. We'll have a time to do that another time, but you know, I certainly will miss her steadfastness and guidance that she's provided me over the last 6 years. So thank you very much to her. I know she's going to be very upset that we've singled her out like that. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else on this subject? It is an important one for the council. I don't want to rush this. I mean, if members have got things to say, reservations, concerns, or anything of that nature, I am very, very happy to hear them now. Oh yes, I have. Councillor Butterfield.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a very good report, and I'd like to just echo the importance that's been placed on climate change, and it's been spoken about this evening, and that we like to politely remind you that we need to perhaps give a focus on that as soon as we get the new structure in place, because it has been pushed to one side because of the pandemic, understandably. But I do believe we must gather momentum on this now because it's very important. I think this is a very good report, and I'm sure my colleagues in our party would agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you. On that subject, I'm sure Mrs. Green will forgive me if I ask her to give you, Mrs. Butterfield, some good news about on the recruitment front in relation to our Green officer. I understand, Mrs. Green, we've now recruited and appointed. Is that right?
Yes, we have indeed. Our new Green Spaces officer joined us 3 weeks ago.
There we are. So that's we might as well call that the Sue Butterfield officer. Is that all right?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
since we're in the business of changing job titles tonight, we might as well do that. No, seriously, we have. I mean, it has been strange during the pandemic, and I vowed that we would not be the sort of council that kept on talking about how the pandemic had affected everything. But actually, it's affected us in very strange ways, and one of them has been the delay to recruitment, and that's exactly the same with the traffic issues. It hasn't been possible to proceed with proper recruitment and get things done like that during pandemic. It's been a very odd period. So the moment we're out of it, we've started now to move ahead, and we do have now a Green Spaces officer who I know is going to make a huge difference to us. Further back up, returning to the top of the organisation again, then, is there anybody that wants to speak about anything else? No. Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I am going to call for a roll call vote because I think this is an important issue. I clearly support it, and I think it's the right thing to do. So if you don't mind, Mrs. Green, can you take us through a roll call?
Okay, so same as before then, everybody please. Councillor Mrs. Allen.
4.
Councillor Arnott.
4.
Councillor Barham.
4.
Councillor Ben Musa.
Against.
Councillor Burrell, not with us still. Councillor Butler.
4.
Councillor Butterfield.
4.
Councillor Canham.
4.
Councillor Cutler.
4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Eadie.
Against.
Councillor Garden.
4.
Councillor Gaskin.
Against.
Councillor Sasha Gosine.
Against.
Councillor Romana Gosine.
Against.
Councillor Graham.
Against.
Councillor Hummock.
For and thank you.
Councillor Harman.
4.
Councillor Honeysett.
Total support.
Councillor Kite.
That's a definite 4. Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd.
For the motion.
Councillor McLean.
Unequivocally 4.
Councillor Moat.
4.
Councillor Nicklin.
4.
Councillor Oakley Dow.
Against, I'm afraid.
Councillor Oguntope.
Against.
Councillor Oliver.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Ozog.
110% for and thank you.
Councillor Peters.
4.
Councillor D. Reynolds.
4.
Councillor L. Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Sandhu.
For the motion.
Councillor Mrs. Story. Councillor Mrs.
Yeah.
Story.
4.
Councillor Swinard.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Thurlow.
4.
Councillor Wells.
4.
Deputy Mayor Councillor Mrs. Currans.
Definitely 4.
Mr. Mayor.
4.
Okay, so that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Green. Wow, am I pleased these meetings are recorded? Okay, item 12, the Scrutiny Committee annual report. To introduce the report there, I'm sure that the Chairman of Scrutiny will want to say a few words, but anyone else? Sorry, I keep forgetting to take a seconder. Can I take a seconder for that?
Second it.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so anyone else want to take a, say anything?
Missing this one.
I've got anybody hand up? Keep your hand up for a minute. I'm on my other screen. Okay. Okay. Councillor Gosar, I presume you want to say something.
No, carry on.
You don't want to say something about your own committee's annual report? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'll do that.
Okay.
No, sorry, no, go. No, sorry, Councillor. Sorry, I thought you was talking about something else. Oh, my bad. Yeah, we've gone back. We've changed our committees a little bit from last year because, as you guys will know, it was our first year for the majority of us to get to understand what the committees were, sort of look at how where our skills bases lay, really. And so over the last year, we've had a look at that, and we felt that some of us were better suited to other roles. And so given that, we've changed over some of our places, and that's what we've done going forward. And I hope that's something that is amenable with the rest of the committee members here as well.
Well, Mrs. Green, has that been brought forward properly and reported then and recorded? Is that what we're doing tonight? We're reporting a new membership?
Well, not on this particular item, Chairman.
I didn't think we were.
We have asked for committee nominations to be made to the Democratic Services Manager from group leaders, and I understand we have had nominations for committee places from Councillor Sasha Gosine. So yes, that has been recorded.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I don't want to cause any further embarrassment tonight, but what normally happens, Sasha, is that you would normally report on the year that's gone by with the scrutiny committee under your chairmanship. I understand it's a new phenomenon, and I get that. And I think what members will have in front of them the report related to the various meetings that were had. I don't think looking at the, if I might take it on, I don't think looking at the outcomes and the recommendations from scrutiny, there have been anything there which has caused us concern, which actually makes us feel that we're on the wrong track with any of those subjects. The meetings, as I understand it, from talking to members and attending the odd one myself, seem to have been well conducted and seem to have been productive. I'd like to thank Sasha and his deputy Matthew for working through the important business of scrutiny. It's a very, very important function. Indeed, when you have a council like us where there is quite a large majority group, then it is very important that scrutiny receives both the proper dignity and the proper attention it deserves. And I can, if it's any reassurance to you, I take a very close interest in the scrutiny committee outcomes and reports, and I'm always relieved to see when they talk about noting and moving forward and pleased with the government, pleased with the council's approach to things. But there we are. So you have the annual report in front of you. If there's no other comments about that, we'll move on. Members happy to accept that? Thank you very much. Item 13 then is the Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny Committee annual report. I'm very happy to propose the recommendations. Councillor Wells, do you want a second for me?
Happy to second, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other member before I ask Councillor Wells to say a quick word about the workings of the Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny Committee? Anybody other member?
It will be me, Jeremy, because
I'm so sorry. I'm a year behind.
It's an evening of mistakes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, what I will do, I won't admit it's a mistake. I will tweet out that it's actually a glorious victory, and that will put it all right. Okay. I won't admit that I've been made to look that small by not bothering to do my research. I will actually go out and say it's a victory. So I do apologise, Councillor McLean. Please go on.
Thank you very much. So I just want to thank all members cross-party for your contribution to Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny in the time that I've been chairing since 2019. We don't meet very often, so the meetings are very long, unfortunately. We're talking 2.5 hours, but we get through quite a lot, and we are definitely a critical friend to the Community Safety Partnership. I want a special thanks to Mr. David Hook, who clerks this meeting so well for us. Thank you also to Councillor Wells, Councillor Allen, who are honorary members in their cabinet portfolios, and lots of contribution from them. And also thank you to Kent Police and community safety officers, particularly, who put a lot of work into all the paperwork that comes through. They're very good at answering questions, and actually, for quite a small CSP in comparison to, say, London authorities, are very, very effective, get a lot of work done, and I think a lot of the time that work's unsung. There's lots of work on the agenda for the next year. We've got quite a full agenda, and I look forward to meeting with everybody. If you do have the time, please do join us. There's lots of, a lot of this stuff that you get from your constituents features here around antisocial behaviour. Appreciate everybody's busy, but you do come and join us. And that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thank you, and apologies.
I'll be giving up the chairmanship to give to Councillor Wells. No, I'm joking.
Well, he can't, can he? Because he can't. I think that's why he moved, isn't it? Because I've dug myself a digger hole now. That doesn't matter. That's not why he moved. He moved because of your extreme qualities.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else want to say anything about this? On again, it's an important subject. And yes, I'm being reminded, of course, it's Brian Gardner who's the Deputy of Scrutiny. I'm so sorry. It's one of those evenings, isn't it? We're all making mistakes here.
Thank you, Jeremy. I just wanted to add a couple of things there.
Yeah.
I did want to thank the clerk for his comprehensive report, which I think adequately summarises what we do. But in particular, I wanted to thank those members that were active in discussion during the committee. That's what it's there for. And I would therefore encourage any new members that we're getting to bear in mind that their job there is to be active, to read the reports, take an opinion, put it forward, make sure we can debate it, and at the end of the debate, make an informed decision as to what the correct output is. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian. I think most members understand the importance of doing their research. I think that's let's hope it's a call that everyone understands. Thank you so much. Okay, are members happy with that report then? Okay, thank you. I think that does it for the committee part now. So may I just ask whether you're happy? Oh no, sorry, there is another thing, which is the General Assembly of the Council work plan. So you have that in front of you. That sets out, of course, the way in which the council will address its big items and big issues, and it's a very useful guide as well for the opposition to understand exactly where their opportunities are for debate and bringing items back. But there we are. The work plan is there in front of you. I don't think if I could just ask for a nominal seconder. Do I have one? Yeah, thank you. I'll take Councillor Calvin McLean. And are members happy to accept that?
Yes.
Great. No other comment from anybody? Go to my other screen. No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. On then to the reconvening the GAC. Are members happy that we reconvene back into our formal GAC? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Members, I've been advised that there are no cabinet minutes have been reserved for debate. Members, this brings tonight's meeting to an end, and I declare the meeting closed. Have a good night, all of you. Stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.